Hello everybody, I'm Jay and this is
Rocco.
Rocco is actually from IDP IELTS, and today I'm going to interview Rocco and we're going to find out all about the difference between IELTS Academic and IELTS General, and we're going to focus specifically on IELTS General Writing Task 1. Hello Rocco.
Hi Jay.
How's it going?
Very well, thank you. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. Okay, so the first thing I want to ask you is just broadly, what's the difference between IELTS Academic and IELTS General?
Well, I guess, Jay, the first thing to think about is what is the purpose of taking the test? For some people, they want to have academic entry, so therefore the IELTS academic test is more suitable. Or some people actually want to register, have professional registration, so for example, health professionals.
Okay.
So a lot of those bodies will ask for the IELTS academic test.
And IELTS academic registration typically means university entrance.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
The IELTS general test, however, could be used for things like migration.
Right.
And I know, for example, in Canada, for example, they would only accept the IELTS general test. Australia's different. We accept both the academic or general test for that purpose.
Okay.
So I guess the main thing is thinking about the purpose of the test.
Yes.
When it comes to the content of the actual test, the speaking and the listening is pretty much the same. There's no difference there.
Pretty much or exactly the same?
Actually, it's exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
The difference comes in the reading and the writing.
All right, good. That's what we want to focus on. So let's firstly talk about the reading section. Okay, so can you describe to me what's the difference between IELTS academic reading and IELTS general training reading?
I guess the first thing to point out is that the question types are the same. You might have a headings question in the academic test.
Yep.
You'll also have a headings question in the general test. So the question types don't vary. Although I guess labelling a diagram is something more common perhaps in the academic test than the general test.
Okay.
The main difference comes with the articles. In the academic test.
Right, so the passages they read.
That's right. So you'll get 3 longer articles in the academic test. Some of a general nature and some of an academic nature. In the general, there is a difference though. Section 3 tends to be the longer article, but Section 1 and Section 2 have shorter articles.
Okay, so there's a difference in length there?
Yes, in Section 2, you'll have 2 shorter articles, but the topic is something work-related.
Okay.
In Section 1, they're much shorter again. It could be a list of items, maybe 5, 6, 8 items that are much shorter. A group of advertisements, for example.
Okay.
But the question types are still the same. Multiple choice, true, false, not given, true, false, not given.
Okay, and when you say the academic has passages of a more academic nature, does that mean they have to read an article on microbiology or something really sophisticated like that?
Well, they might be in that theme or that topic, but you don't need to have...
You don't need to be a microbiologist?
No, you don't need specialised knowledge. They're testing you on your English, not on your knowledge of particular science or anything like that.
Yeah.
If there is a technical word that is used in the article, there's quite often a little glossary with a definition at the bottom of the article.
Got it. Okay, so if you're preparing for either of these tests, keep in mind that the questions are the same. So that's a good place to start, I think. You really do need to learn the different question types. Cool, let's talk next about writing task 2. Okay, so for both tests, academic and general, you have to write an essay. This is called writing task 2. Is there a difference between the academic and the general in the type of essay they write?
You'll see that the question types are the same.
Okay.
To what extent you agree or disagree will appear in both.
Advantages, disadvantages, problem solution.
Yes, that'll appear in both types. If anything, the academic test might be a little bit more focused.
Okay.
If I use the example of should public transport be free? That's quite a broad question. In the academic test, perhaps it's a little bit more targeted, like should public transport be free for students?
Gotcha.
Or the elderly, or something like that.
Hone in a little bit more.
A little bit more, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay.
But the main difference is in task 1.
Okay, good one. Well, let's now talk about writing task 1. Okay, so let's talk about writing task 1. What do they have to do in the academic writing task 1?
Well, in that particular task, the test taker will have something visual
Right.
And they've got to transform that into something written.
Yeah.
And the visual things are graphs quite often, something like a line graph describing that,
Yeah.
pie charts,
Yeah.
bar graph, a table of data, or even a process
Right.
or maps.
Good one.
The map question could be, say, a cross-section of a building or something outdoors, something
Like
geographical.
a past and a future, or present future or something.
Something like that. And you'll also find there could be a combination of those types. It could be a bar graph with a pie chart, for example,
Gotcha.
as well. So at least 150 words
Yeah.
and describing the main trends, highlighting all the key features using figures or data,
Yeah.
having an overview
Yeah.
as well. That's important.
Okay, so that's academic. So let's now talk about the general training writing task 1, which is significantly different.
Significantly different,
Right.
yes. So in that case, there's a letter to write. It's not the same as a letter in everyday life in that you don't need to put addresses and things like that.
Right.
You just begin the letter with dear. But then you'll get different types. There are some formal, some informal, or even semi-formal.
Right. Yes. Okay. So formality is a key, and we'll talk. I want to talk a little bit later about the scoring. So let's just talk first of all on test day. They sit down and they'll see something like this. Can you tell me about that, or tell everyone about that prompt that they've just seen?
Well, first thing they will see is some background information. It could be something that they've experienced personally. You bought a piece of furniture
Right.
from a store
Yep.
a few days ago, but you've noticed some problems with it. Write a letter to the store owner.
Right.
And then they're given 3 bullet points that they have to cover. It could be something like describing the piece of furniture, perhaps explaining the problem and thinking of a solution, something like that. So they've got to answer those 3 bullet points in their response.
Great. So let's talk about scoring for the writing. And I understand that scoring is the same for the essay and for task 1. So this would be good to know, and something that we talk about on this channel at length, how important those criteria are. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You need to write and satisfy the examiners, don't you?
That's correct. Now, remember that the examiner will use the same criteria. Doesn't matter if it's academic or general.
Yes.
So that same thing applies to both.
Great.
So I guess the task achievement is key. That's worth 25% of the score.
Yep.
In the general training, there's a few things that are different to the academic. And one of those things is the tone of the letter.
Okay. So what does that mean, tone?
So it's writing in the correct, I guess, in the correct mood. If it's a letter of complaint, it's something formal. But if you're using casual language, the tone won't sound right. Or if you're writing a letter to a friend and you're using very academic or formal vocabulary, your friend might react quite differently. So I guess one way to think about it, Jay, is to put yourself in the shoes of the person who reads the letter.
Yeah. Okay.
You are the store owner. You're the friend who receives the letter. How would they react to this type of language?
Right, because if I've the piece of furniture that I've bought is broken and I get home, I'm going to be disappointed and perhaps frustrated. So I need to express that, don't I?
That's
in a
correct.
and also at a certain formality, because if I'm disappointed or frustrated with a friend, I'm going to use different language than if I'm writing to the store owner, for example.
That's right.
Yeah.
I guess one other thing to consider is that the task 1 letter is something cultural. And let's look at a letter of complaint, for example, where how you complain in an English-speaking culture, like Australia or UK or US, might be different to how people complain in a different culture.
Right.
So that can affect the tone, where perhaps someone is being too aggressive or too indirect, perhaps,
Yeah.
when writing these kind of letters.
Right.
If it's apologising, some cultures like to apologise a lot.
Profusely.
Yes, that's a good word, profusely.
Yeah.
An uncommon word, which is good for vocabulary. But some people do it quite indirectly or subtly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to pick up as well.
Good one. Okay, interesting. So that's task achievement. And that also includes really writing about those bullet points from the prompt and developing them out and having quite extensive answers. How would you describe that?
Well, for the higher bands, an examiner is looking to see if the test taker has fully developed and extended those bullet points appropriately.
Yeah.
I guess a test taker should think, when they finish the letter, is there anything else I can add to complete this? Is there anything else I can say?
Yeah.
At the same time, they don't want to overdo it.
Yeah.
As we said with apologising,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount that's appropriate to apologise, but
Right.
not overdoing it.
Wow, that's a complex thing there, especially with the cultural interferences or influences there. That's interesting. I recommend probably looking at model letters would be a good way to begin to understand what's sort of appropriate, culturally appropriate when complaining or applying or apologizing, etc. Okay, cool. So that's task achievement. Let's now talk about coherence and cohesion, which I understand is about really structure and flow of the letter.
That's right. So it looks at things like paragraphing.
Right.
Now, I know essays have paragraphs, but letters also need paragraphs as well.
Right.
Clearly separated paragraphs.
Yeah.
And the bullet points help with that
Yes,
aspect.
absolutely.
In the academic test, try to find a category that you want to compare. If it's a line graph, perhaps you want to categorize a body paragraph into a particular time period or between a particular items. Make it clear for the examiner.
Yeah.
In the essay, it's important to have a really clear topic sentence, and that topic or that theme is continued throughout the paragraph. I guess also looking at connectors.
Yes.
Not just at the beginning of a sentence, but maybe at the beginning of the paragraph, but not to overdo them as well.
Yes, not to underdo them and not to overdo them, right?
That's right.
It's a happy balance.
You don't want the answer to sound very robotic.
Yeah, mechanical. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So also looking for things like avoiding repetition. You could say, yes, I live in Melbourne. Melbourne is a beautiful city. Or you could replace Melbourne with it is a beautiful city.
Okay.
That kind of referencing is important.
Pronoun referent, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
I guess also there is the logical progression.
Yeah,
as well.
okay. Yeah. It's really about putting yourself in the reader's shoes so the reader reads it and understands it clearly and it's well structured for the reader.
Yes, I think if people are doing a preparation, to give their practice letter to someone to read and look at their reaction. How would you react to this?
Good one. Yeah. Or even better, you can send it across to E2 Language for feedback. Good one. Okay, let's now talk about the third criterion, which is grammar. It might be vocab, but anyway, let's talk about grammar. Now, grammar really has two parts to it. Everyone knows that they have to write accurately. Like if it's a plural noun, you have to put the S on the end and the verb tense has to be correct and the right preposition. But what about grammatical range? This is something people forget, right?
Yes, I guess for a lot of people, they think of grammar is just accuracy.
Right.
But range includes using a variety of sentences.
Yeah.
And I immediately think of the academic task 1, where you're describing multiple lines or multiple segments in a paragraph, not to use the same sentence type. But try to use a variety. It could be a conditional sentence or passive voice, active voice, complex noun phrases.
Yeah.
That kind of variety is important.
Good one.
But there's also complexity as well.
Yes.
I know some people say, oh, I'm just going to write in short sentences because that reduces the amount of mistakes. True, but you also need complexity.
Yes.
So compound sentences is important. That's very important.
Yeah. And complex sentences, right?
Absolutely. So you need that good balance of accuracy and complexity as well.
Yes, good one. We're pretty strict on that at E2 Language. We in our live classes, for example, we talk about the necessity of putting in those complex sentences, those subordinating clauses. You probably know what I'm talking about if you're an E2 student. Great. So let's talk about the final criterion, which is vocabulary, and it has two parts as well, right?
Well, look, there's the precision of the word choice. And there's also range as well.
Right.
A bit like grammar, you don't want to repeat the same vocabulary again and again.
Right.
But also, so using variety is important, but also look at things like collocation, paraphrasing. So if you've used a word, a good word, don't use it again. Otherwise, it can show that you don't have as good a range.
What should you do with a word like child or children that doesn't really have a synonym? I mean, you can say kid, but that would be quite informal. So if there really is just one word and it doesn't really have synonyms, what should the writer do?
Well, one thing is to look at the different parts of speech. So we look at verbs, nouns, adjectives, adverbs. So the word prefer is a really common word.
Sure.
So you don't want to repeat that once. You could say preference.
Preference.
Or preferable, preferably.
Yeah, interesting.
And then you'll find that the grammar changes as well.
Okay.
You can have an influence on someone or something, or you can influence someone or something. The word doesn't change there, it's still influence, but the grammar changes. The collocation is different. Beautiful, beautify, beautifully.
Beautiful. All right. Cool. All right. That's interesting. Nice. So there's vocabulary range there. All right. So I think everyone's got a pretty good understanding now of what's going on there, what the difference is between academic and general, what its purpose is, and most importantly, that writing task one, which is significantly different. Is there any last tips you'd like to give people at home?
I guess the important thing is to practice as much as they can.
Yeah, even if you're a native speaker, right?
Absolutely. They've got to take the test seriously. Become familiar with the test, with the test type, with the question type, and with the limitations. The reading is a classic where, oh yes, I can read and understand this, but can you do it in an hour?
Right.
Understanding what the assessment criteria is for speaking and writing.
Yes.
You know, people will lose marks if they don't write enough words or if they don't include all the bullet points in the letter. So be familiar with the expectations of the test.
Yeah.
Practice. Doing test preparation is great, but complement it with also using English in everyday life as much as they can.
Good one.
You know, if they have a particular hobby, do the hobby in English. If you like reading about celebrities, read about them in English.
Good.
That kind of thing.
Great. All right. Thanks very much for coming along. I really appreciate you coming down here.
My pleasure, Jay. Thank you.
Good one.